Last week we spent some time talking about daring to dream. And this week I want to bring those dreams a little closer to reality by talking about establishing your baseline. So I want to help illustrate this concept with an example. In the book, The Endurance Leader, I talk about an amazing young athlete named Chris Nikich. Chris wanted to do an Ironman race, which had never been tried before by someone with Down syndrome, which Chris has. So in order for Chris to be able to do this successfully, he and his dad spent a lot of time understanding where Chris was starting from a physical, mental, and emotional standpoint. By doing that, they could then set the right goals for the race that Chris was going to complete a year later, which he did complete and became the first person with Down syndrome to complete an Ironman race. So we can see in the endurance athlete space the criticality of having a good baseline to help us establish and meet our interim goals toward our long-term goal. In business, we do this, of course, all the time. You have strategic goals, and in between, we have objectives and shorter-term goals that are established based on where we are right now. Otherwise, how do we know how to get to our goal, right? It's a pretty rational process. But when it comes to leadership and endurance leadership, people sometimes get a little bit lost in how to do this. They don't think about who's this person I ultimately want to be and how close am I to that person right now. And in order for us to bring that person into our life, to set some goals, to behaviorally demonstrate more of that future and ideal self, we need to kind of understand how close we are to it right now. So how do we establish a baseline here? Well, there's some very helpful tools that can be part of this process. And I'll just go through a couple tools that I use to help leaders establish their baseline frequently. One is personality-based assessments. As a psychologist, I am a big fan of people understanding their personality DNA, as I like to call it. The parts of them that are really quite fixed, they may change slightly over time, but ultimately the qualities and characteristics that we're carrying around with us every day. These are our inner kind of leadership qualities, and those are going to have a big part in how we actually show up. In addition, tools like a 360 or multi-rater feedback tools can be helpful in understanding how other people actually experience us. A 360 is so called, if you're not familiar with it, because it's a way of gathering information about ourselves and how we're showing up from ourselves, but also from our bosses, our peers, our direct reports, maybe our customers, maybe key relationships, etc. Those people give feedback about how they experience us. And based on that data, we can kind of get a feel for how well is that future person actually showing up in our day-to-day life. So let's give an example. Let's say part of your future self is, I want to be known as a boss who really cared about people and strives to help them be successful. That's a great goal, and it could be met a lot of different ways. But before we kind of set goals around making that big goal happen, we should kind of understand, how are you actually showing up in that right now? Personality data might help us understand. Are you someone who is naturally very interpersonally sensitive, or are you someone who is extremely sociable and team-oriented? Those factors might make a difference in how we set goals. If you're naturally drawn towards people, the goals we might set to help you get closer to that ideal self might be different than somebody who is very deeply introverted and may withdraw under pressure. Might still be a goal, but what we need to do to get there might look very different. So those are a couple of tools. And I want to talk for a moment about the importance of self-awareness. So one of the critical elements around setting these kinds of goals and understanding and using the baseline data to help us get there is we need to be self-aware. And without that, it becomes very, very difficult to embrace the kinds of information that we get from these kinds of tools. I have many, many examples of leaders that I've met that either lacked self-awareness or really resisted a balanced view of themselves, were kind of over-indexed on all the ways that they were really great and weren't as open to recognizing the places where they might need to change. So if you are someone who really wants to embark on this endurance leader journey, in addition to thinking about your ideal self, you'll need to collect some baseline data and be open to what that data says about you. Tools like the Johari window, I recommend you look up because it talks a lot about using tools that can help decrease our blind spots, which we all have. But again, this is all contingent on your willingness to embrace a balanced view. There's significant data in the literature that shows that there is a high correlation between leaders' self-awareness and success. So as a psychologist, I implore you, spend some time looking at and getting a realistic picture of your own self-awareness. If you're lacking in that, if you're resisting that, it might be worth getting some help, some support, either through a coach or a mentor or even a therapist, to be able to ensure that you're open to really getting a good, strong baseline. That baseline is going to help us in our next segment when we talk about mapping that ideal self into our current self and setting goals around that. Good luck.